Okay, so let's chop up this week. Um, right. Major key points in this video I want to talk about primarily is market timing, right? Market timing and and being so in the zone that that is just flow, just like a flow state of just being in the zone, in tune with time and price, and just flowing, right? So the week opens up Monday here, um, which was and price just drops, right? Which is anticipated, right? Because how Friday essentially closes, if we just acknowledge all of the unsustainability of these ranges, right? So nonetheless, this was anticipated, right? Um, Trying to see where the previous, let me mark the previous weekly low on here. So this here basically being the previous weekly low. Here, right. All right, so nonetheless, price opens up and we drop significantly, all right? And Monday we run the previous weekly low. New York comes in and runs the previous weekly low. Now here, for example, if we just talk about time and price here during this New York session, right? So the ninth hour comes in here, and during this ninth hour, if we just acknowledge how inefficiently price comes here and runs this previous weekly low. Now, within this very first 2 hour segment of this first hour of the first 4 hours of New York, within between 9 to 11, within the very first hour, this would be the second hour within this 2 hour segment, right? So at 10 at within between the 10th hour and the 11th hour, this right here essentially becomes perfect timing to then create this H2 low, perfect timing to create the H2 low and the H1 low here, right? It's a very perfect timing. Why? Because during this New York session, we've just ran the previous weekly low. So we've just swept major sell side liquidity left. Right? Now, if we throw time into the equation, as just previously spoken about, this is now perfect timing. There's a lot of confluence around timing from a H1 to a H2, and then at this point, a potentially a H4, right? But during this time in the day, at this time in the day, if we're anticipating this to potentially create the daily low, then in this case, it also would be perfect timing to then create the H4 low as well, right? But right here, if we just acknowledge the anatomy of price here alone, right? And you can see how this hour opens up. This hourly candle opens up here. The hourly candle opens up here, creates this wick. Prices trading the way down. Acknowledge how inefficiently this entire push to the downside is, right? And then we just come back and visit that open zone. Um, but nonetheless, from there, price basically continues. Now, once this breaker structure there takes place, if we acknowledge that the 13th hour opens here, but this is just that 4-hour continuation play. A really nice 4-hour continuation play to just essentially come get this high, right? Because at this time in the market, right, if I'm anticipating this to potentially be the daily low, I wouldn't technically want price no lower here because there's nothing for price to mitigate. There's nothing to hold price here per se, right? So there's just been a lot of confluence around this 13th hour, right? We got this nice demand zone here. If we put the actual open, which would have been here, price didn't actually tip that, but it almost did. Open would have been here. Here, right? But just taking that alone and just targeting this, right? And then also from a perspective as time alone, right? 10, 14, 15. So if we put the 15 hour on here, we're now approaching the last 2 hours within this 4-hour segment, right? So then this would be perfect timing, therefore, for this H2 low to be printed. Now, also, if we just acknowledge the anatomy of price here per se, so if I put the 16th hour, 16 hours here, so not really much significance there, but if we just acknowledge how inefficiently price is moving down. All right. Now, the cool thing about an hour segment, because everything is fractal. So if we break this hour segment down into two at 15:30, right, then we could see that within this 1 hour segment, we had a 30-minute low here, which then becomes the sweep, right? So 30 M low, right? You can even break that down to an hourly segment, right? Break this hourly segment down into two, and you can see how inefficiently now we then sweep this low here, right? So if you were waiting for some optimism, then this would be that break and then catch something here. But this right here would be enough confluence alone for me to buy here, right? And essentially target this higher. Nonetheless, so that's a very perfect example as far as timing is concerned there. Now, nonetheless, the very next day comes into place and Asia sweeps this H4 high here and we drop significantly, right? So a major constant liquidity target, H4H, right? And then from here, we do acknowledge that the current H2 low, the current H4 low is here. So the current H4 low is here. And then we have to take into account how inefficiently price sweeps. You can really draw that from here, but just how inefficiently, price sweeps this major constant liquidity target. So therefore, post this sweep, what's the first constant liquidity target that the algo has to come and fulfill, which is this current H4 low. And as we can see, as price done so, we come in, the algo fills itself, right, with the current H4 low, and then we halt, right, essentially for the remainder of this H4, the remainder of this H4 segment here. And then from a perspective of time, right, if we do 17, so if we put the 2-hour mark here, so this was the H2 low. And then if we throw the hour mark here, so 1920, right? So for a sake of time in this perspective here, right? the last hour, right, of this 2-hour segment, the last hour, of this 2-hour segment here, acknowledge how price opens here, and the first thing we do, inefficiently, we run up, right? So now, from a time perspective, right? So within this very last hour, the very first thing we do is go sweep major buy side liquidity of a constant liquidity target, right? So now, from a time perspective, this now can become perfect timing to first and foremost create this H1 high. Or in this case, look at it like this is essentially creating this H1 wick. That's all this is doing, is creating an H1 wick, right? Because at this point, price opened here. Right, so we're creating that H1 wick, but then now it's perfect timing. So essentially create the H1 high, the H2 high, and considering it's the last hour of this 4-hour segment, is now perfect timing to create the H4 high, right? If you think about time, right? If you think about let's break this down. Right? Let's break this down like this. If we and let's do a box. All right, so if we think about, take this. Right, so if we think about this one H4 candle, right, and if we think about this one H4 candle like it's a daily candle, for example, and in each one of these candles, each one of these 4-hour segments essentially represent a session in a day, right? So for example, you could say that this right here would be Sydney. Asia, London, New York. Right? If we broke this H4 candle down as if it was a daily candle, because it's the same ideology, right? When we go to talk about the fractalness of the market, right? This is the same ideology of a daily candle, right? And when we talk about this last hour of this 4-hour segment, imagine this essentially being the last session of a daily candle, right? And with it being like, if say, for example, if this was New York or a daily candle, and it being the last session, this would be the session in which you would anticipate the high of the day to be printed, right? So when you look at this from a 4-hour standpoint, it's the same ideology, right? This is the last hour of this H4 segment, right? So this is like the New York of this H4 segment, right? And within the last hour of this H4 segment, we run price trades up impulsively, very inefficiently, and we go sweep a major buy side liquidity target, which is the H4 high. right? Therefore, it's now perfect timing for this H4 high to be printed. It's the last hour of this H4 segment, right? And then from there, then what's the target? The current H4 low, right? Because, well, you could say the current H2 low, right? But what's the most recent constant liquidity target that went swept major buy side liquidity, right? Which would be the current H4 low. And as you see here, this is the very first point in the market that the algo runs to and fills within this H4 segment. And it creates the catalyst. And the only thing price does within this last hour is we run back and tap the open here. And we close bearish. That's it. Right. So essentially the very first, what, 15, just say 30 minutes of this hour candle, the only thing this was essentially doing up here was creating an H1 wick. That's it. That's how you master the art of timing. Now, this here is just thinking from a fractal standpoint of like a daily candle, and you break a 4-hour candle down into hourly sets and almost look at them to hourly segments, and look at it almost as if it's sessions, right? And apply the same ideology with the day. So that's very, very, very dope. Like the art of timing, right? Where time and price, where are you? What is price doing? What is it sweeping? Um, um, taking all of those things into consideration plays a major role in turn points like this, the catalyst, the turn points and catalysts just like this, right? And then mind you, this right here was an automatic easy target because it's Monday. Yes, we did sweep major sell side liquidity left, but it's Monday. So I'm not anticipating at this point, I wasn't anticipating this here to be the weekly low to shift price back bullish, right? So this is just the automatic target. But nonetheless, as you can see, that's the first place that price runs to at the open at the 21st hour. Is now we go and we sweep the previous daily low.